Welcome to another recorded live event supporting our most recent Living Resilience introductory course, Collateral Beauty. This course, designed to challenge and resource both newcomers and the very experienced in the collapse-aware and collapse-acceptant communities. Each recording in this series is from either the Saturday or Tuesday online Zoom gatherings intended to deepen an embodied and shared experience of this inner work of collapse in the course called Collateral Beauty. All right, welcome to a number of different groups of people who may end up watching this video. Of course, there are the people that here in Living Resilience. My name is Dean Walker. I'm the founder of this little online organization and community called Living Resilience. And this is one of our courses. In fact, it's the most current iteration of our introductory course called Collateral Beauty, the inner work of collapse. And this is one of two group practice sessions that we're offering on live Zoom. And then they'll be posted in recording fashion in each of the 6 weeks of the 6 sections of this course. So we are in session week 5. So we're heading into our 5th week of material here in this far too brief, far too shallow, given the amount of time and depth that we can accurately or pursue well in this short amount of time. I'll get to what we're going to be covering in just a minute, but I'd like to just acknowledge some more of the folks who are going to be here. So I was just talking about the folks who are actually signed up for this course, and you're in the Living Resilience community space. It's a Mighty Networks space, and that's where the course lives. And there's a little support group chat area if one wanted to have any conversations or meet other people who are engaged with the work. That could be you. You could be one of those people who's participating either live on a Tuesday or a Saturday version of these group practice sessions, or you're entirely recordings only for the course material, and then perhaps watching a few of these group practice sessions on your own. Either way, as far as this crowd that I'm talking about so far, I really am hoping for you that 2 things: that you are taking this on with the sincerity to engage in journaling, and whenever possible, also creating prompts for yourself for conversations that you might have with friends or family or associates that are on a similar wavelength. You know, this is not good material to just kind of dump in someone's lap and expect them out of the blue to understand or be sympathetic with it or resonant with it. So I'm hoping very much that you are engaging with journaling in this work, and there are plenty of prompts built in to the material, and also some included in some of the videos, for instance. The second thing I would like to just underscore, those of you who are in the course, you know that I repeat this quite a bit, especially in the first couple of weeks. There is nothing quite like being able to participate in this course with someone else, you know, kind of in parallel tracks. You're each watching perhaps the videos or reading the articles for the week, and then being in touch with one another once, twice, however many you might want to do in terms of getting together on Zoom or a phone call and explore some of this work. So that's for the folks who are actually in and engaged with this Collateral Beauty course, the inner work of collapse. Some other folks who are going to be watching this video are a number of different groups who are kind enough to be interested and put out some feelers for more information about what is this work. And yeah, and just how to get a more of a visceral sense of what are you doing, Dean? And for many, many of the folks who are watching, no matter where it is you're coming from and so on, you're probably familiar with the name Michael Dowd, whom I'm very much missing these days. And he, of course, died last year of extremely unexpectedly, to shock for us all. And just a deep bow of respect and appreciation for the body of work that Michael Dowd put together. You'll see that there are a couple of his classic, his cornerstone videos that he's produced, of which he has produced hundreds. So why I'm bringing up Michael Dowd, besides to honor him, is to repeat that question one more time. What is it you do, Dean? That's something that Michael Dowd asked me a lot. And at least I appreciated his curiosity and his interest. But it was, yeah, it was an interesting kind of prod for me. It was to make myself more and more clear as I do the thing that I probably do the worst in the world in terms of marketing or describing the work that I produce and that I offer. So in an attempt to answer a couple of similar questions from some of these groups who have requested clearer information, one of which is the resilience and acceptance in the face of collapse group, and a couple of their course creators have been kind enough to show some interest and curiosity and asked me now months ago, could you tell us what is your thing with practices? We don't really get it. Like, how does it show up? What is your focus on practices? And hopefully those that I spoke of before, who are in this course, you get a strong sense of it, because every one of the 6 sessions of this introductory course offers some sort of embodied practice and an opportunity to dive much deeper into a number of different kinds of practice that we'll be describing later on in this particular video. So here we are. It's session 6. We've got some folks who've been around a while watching this as a group practice in the series of 6 weeks of group practice sessions on both Tuesdays and Saturdays. And we've got some folks who are interested, perhaps, or just curious in what is this work? How does it differ from, let's say, the acceptance and resilience in the face of collapse course, the 9-week course that's been running for a couple of years now, grown to immense proportions, and I wish them and every one of the groups that's implied here well. Another is the Collapse-Acceptance group. Shout out to you all, and thank you for having me on at least once, and it looks like it might be happening again soon. You might just be watching this in anticipation of my next visit to your Thursday gatherings. So I'm going to go through a ridiculously quick recap of the first 4 sections, weeks of this introductory course here in Living Resilience. Again, the name of the course is Collateral Beauty. Hopefully, for those you've been around this conversation long enough to understand that the idea of collateral beauty is based on what if in the face of this imminent collapse, what if we were to be able to create an inordinate amount of beauty? What if we were what if we were able to find a depth of intimacy that perhaps none of us has experienced before, all as we step forward into this extraordinary predicament-laden world? What if this could be an opportunity to have a depth and quality of relatedness with each other, with soul, with our own spiritual nature, with each other? What if we were able to generate that extraordinary, possibly even sacred relatedness with one another, no matter what is on the horizon and no matter what the timeline is between now and that event? If that's some sort of extinction event, if that's some sort of collapse, none of us knows the exact timing, and really doesn't matter at this point, from my point of view. What matters is, what are the qualities of my relationship? What are the qualities of my presence? What are the ways in which I can deploy my attention in a good way, rather than having it predated by our viciously predatory global parasitic culture, self-terminating culture, which of course our attention is the coin of the realm. And it's been predated now for decades, but significantly a massive jump since the introduction of the smartphone. So let's just start at the beginning. Well, I'll be doing this recap, and the container for the recap is really one of the cornerstones of how we put together this introductory course. We based it on a model that I'm pretty sure all of you will be very familiar with, called Paul Chafurka's Stages of Awareness. We will, of course, start at the first level, which is the business as usual level, which Paul Chafurka calls the dead asleep level. And in that level, we will remind ourselves that there are very few people who are actively engaged with any of the conversations about collapse or predicament or species extinction, or about as good as it gets is someone hears, they've heard the words climate change, but they don't really know much about it, and don't probably have space in their lives to go much deeper than just a headline news. And that might include being a full-on denier and just forget about it, or it could be that they care some, but they just don't have the space or the bandwidth to be able to engage with it. So there's really not much to talk about there, because what this work does is, at each level, we attempt to offer a menu of practices and distinctions that can be useful, that can be helpful to a person who's sincerely engaged with stepping through these stages of awareness. So again, at the business as usual or dead asleep level, there's not much for us to offer here. Really, it's just folks doing life the way that we've always done life. And it's exactly the life that everybody was hoping that we could get back to soon, as soon as possible during the pandemic. That's what everybody wanted to return to, was the business as usual world, with all of its glorious, incredible progress and the beauty of this civilization, and also the self-terminating and deeply shadow-infected business as usual paradigm. So let's go to the next level, which is one problem. At the one problem level of Paul Chafurka's model, we still are in those lives. We're still up to our earlobes in our daily world, and we're all for the most part, uh, really struggling with having a full plate and trying to get it all done and trying to make enough money to get by, and so on and so on. We've got full lives. And we still don't have much attention to offer this climate change stuff, or this environmental stuff, or this, the occasional, seeing this occasional headline that includes the word degrowth or capitalism or whatever. And many of us just don't have the bandwidth here. But this one problem level, as Paul Chafurkas introduces it to us, uh, gives us the opportunity to to wake up, and oftentimes it's quite a rough awakening. What's been happening around the world, this much I know we all know about to some degree or another, is the amount of natural disasters around the world, and also depending on the area, the economic ups and downs that can be quite traumatic depending on your region, your state, your country, your business, so on. But what we're talking about here is at some number of events that happen in your life that get your attention. And as the mental health expert and professional boxer emeritus, Mike Tyson here in the States likes to say, everybody's got a plan till you get punched in the face. So this is the punch in the face level. Something has happened here in this area where I live in Southern Oregon. 3 years ago, we had quite a rapid and intense fire that in 24 hours had 10,000 people out of their homes. And a number of businesses were lost as well, and very traumatic. So that, in again, a rather tragic and bold, high contrast way, is a one problem that has our attention. And whether or not it actually connects us with anything about climate change or the economy or any other factors, chances are pretty low. What's going on here is first the shock, and literally the shock of the felt embodied experience of shock, which can include, I'm dissociated, I just check out, I'm not even in my body. I'm not able to be really present in a conversation. I'm shocked. My house is in ashes in front of me. Or I'm sleeping with my family and 50 other families in the high school gym down the street. So this is a time of shock and incredible dysregulation. So if we could call our normal daily living, everything's going fine, a regulated state, a state where you have some amount of center, some amount of familiar bodily state that you can function with, to be regulated. Then there's dysregulated. It's something comes along and knocks you off center, takes that center and smashes it. So self-regulation, dysregulation. There's also when you've got other people, like that family I mentioned, you and your family are sleeping with 50 other families in the high school gym because your neighborhood is decimated. There's a need for self-regulation, absolutely. You've got to be able to get back into your body, because it's literally life-threatening to be in too much shock for too long. But it's also, of course, you're wanting to be with the people you love and be able to care for them, at least offer them your attention and pay attention in a good way. That involves self-regulation, and it involves co-regulation, so that you all can be of service to one another. You can all hold space for one another, so that you can sit down and calm your systems down in that high school gym setting or wherever you are. And you have the ability to take care of one another to some small degree, way more than when you were just full on dysregulated. This is the zone of both segments or sections or week 1 and 2. The first week, we actually shifted things quite a bit this year, and we put in Michael Dowd's 2023 Canadian Club of Rome presentation, which I believe is quite easily his most concise and clear talk about the imminent nature and the unavoidable nature of collapse for this culture, for this global self-terminating culture. So that's really meant to be our kind of punch in the face, if you will. And it doesn't get any more gentle and clear and articulated than what Michael Dowd presents us in section 1. In section 2, there's this opportunity to start to be in our bodies. Remember that embodied practices part that I was telling you about. This one is led by a man who's tremendously able in terms of his ability to heal. He's a Chinese medicine healer. And he's also extremely aware of the impact and residual corrosion that can happen in our system through trauma in our bodies, trauma in our lives, trauma in our systems. It's a word I use quite a bit. So that person is Jack Adam Weber, and that's the embodied practices section of week 2. I recommend highly, as I mention quite often in these classes. These are not very sexy skills. They're very, very basic. They start with breath. They start with feeling our body, literally feeling the sensation of our rear end in the chair, our feet on the floor. I often use the example of being able to squeeze my knees, my thighs. And what that does is bring me to more actual embodied presence in the moment. I'm getting back into my body if I've been dysregulated out of my body. So again, the rich offering there, and a reminder that there are many, many resources available. All you need to do at any of the 6 levels of this course, you can check into the deep dive sections that are 7 and 8 and 9, where people can do a deep dive on their own if they wanted more information about a particular topic. Let's move on to section 3. In section 3, we start to get a sense of where the practices can happen in a more robust and continuous way, even if you have only a small amount of a familiar life going on. In that sleeping in the gym and house in ashes situation, it might be months before this family gets back to center and has a routine that they can count on, and so on. But most of us are blessed with being able to have some amount of routine, some amount of space that we have discretionary choice about. So what I'm hoping is being done by folks who are engaged in this course is by seeing some of the videos, hearing some of the stories, getting a sense of some of the exercises, the practices, being able to choose for themselves, people able to choose like off of a menu of different practices, depending on some of the responses that each person will have to a set of questions that's peppered out throughout the 6 sections of the course. And one of the first ones is, what matters most to you? And as self-explanatory as that seems to be, it's so obvious, like, why do I need to even write it down? what I've found is that it's often very useful to set aside 3 or 4 pages in your journal for revisiting this question, this simple but profound question: what matters most to you? What matters most to you in life in general, as you can see it now? What matters most to you in this moment? What matters most to you in your primary relationship, in your family, in your neighborhood, in your work? It's actually a rich and multifaceted question and inquiry that I suggest that we all engage with on a regular basis. For me, it's monthly. And for some aspects, some facets, it's more than that. So this is where we start to offer a very different kind of embodied practice. This is a very unusual one that I can only imagine would have Michael Dowd scratching his head like, Dean, what do you do? This is probably a pretty good example of that. And it's called Wider Embraces. It's a guided meditation. Usually takes less than an hour, usually done with a few other people on a Zoom call. Happens easily and well in a Zoom call. In fact, I've never done it with a group in person. I've only ever done it with a group on Zoom. What I'm going to leave you, I'm just going to leave you a teaser of that. What Wider Embraces is masterful at is allowing or inviting or invoking a way of seeing, a way of experiencing, and then a way of articulating what can only be called energetic occurrences, a way of deploying our attention, shifting our attention just following the simple, gentle, there's no weirdness here, there's no inaudible cues or anything. This is just simple listening to the instructions of the guided imagery. And I've lost count of how many people I have seen be brand new, never heard of energy or energy body or special seeing or non-ordinary states, that they go through this simple less than an hour of guided meditation, and they've been able to shift their attention in ways that can only be explained as an energetic shift that they cause for themselves. And then then as the instructions are opened up for this, they articulate what they're seeing, what they're perceiving, because everybody's got their eyes closed. I'm laughing because it's ironic, and I've studied energetics for years, the energy body and so on, and I don't regret a moment of it. But I'll tell you this, the speed and usefulness of the learning of these energetic distinctions and practices, mind-blowing, and makes me laugh. Makes me laugh that some of these things took me a year of regular practice to be able to really get a sense of, and so on. So that's a little bit more about, we're up to section 3 now, and we've got a very unusual, but I hope very, very valuable and intriguing embodied practice for section 3. What I haven't mentioned yet is along the lines of remember the collateral beauty idea? So the collateral beauty is brought in with each weekly session or the course materials for that week. You will find videos that include music, sing-along music, which is my favorite. Even though I'm a horrid singer, you'll be really happy that I'm not singing on the screen. But they're just glorious. They're glorious in terms of co-regulation. Remember that self-regulation, bringing yourself back to center. How about co-regulation, where you're in a circle of people, got a big old bunch of people, And I know of no faster way to co-regulate than to start singing with one another. You'll see. There are a couple of really great sing-alongs. There are other songs that aren't implied for singing along, but you certainly can. There's poetry. There are art videos. So I hope you will enjoy the collateral beauty part of this course. That's in every one of the weeks, even though I'm not covering it very well in this rapid fire recap. Let's move on to section 4. And section 4, gosh darn it, I'm gonna just quickly recap, go back to section 3 and mention there's probably the central video, the central core curriculum component for week 3 is a mythopoetic presentation by a man who's been living in that neighborhood for decades. He's an extraordinary storyteller, drummer, and facilitator. And what he does is recover ourselves, reclaim ourselves. He helps us to reclaim and recover ourselves in a very unusual version of center, one that comes from the mythopoetic. He can be bringing in threads from ancient mythology, or he could be talking about Jungian imagery. And you don't have to know anything about any of them. He tells the story and he weaves it, and before you know it, it's like, yeah, I get it. This is a great way to bring myself back to the strength that I've lost recently, and so on. You'll notice if you do take this course and you do get to section 3, and his name is Michael Mead, and you'll hear Michael describe the years and years of work he's done with troubled youth, troubled teenagers, gang kids, especially in various cities around the USA and elsewhere. And you'd think that this stuff would be way over their head. It's psychospiritual, it's mythopoetic, it's some sort of mythology from hundreds or thousands of years ago, and on and on. The reasons why they wouldn't get it, or I wouldn't get it, which I definitely had that concern. And they're just on the edge of their seats. They totally get it, that these are archetypal, these are unanimous in our experience. And there's, a phrase from Carl Jung, one of the founders of this kind of depth psychology, the idea of a collective unconscious. These are elements that are flowing through all of us ancestrally, back generations. So I invite you to check this out as a framing for how we might bring an ancestral wisdom back up through the hundreds or thousands of years of lineage that precede all of us. And interestingly enough, the focus of this particular presentation from Michael Mead is the idea of reclaiming our center, which, if there's one punchline here, that is it. Without reclaiming our center, without expanding our capacity to be present in the face of larger and larger stressors, I don't predict good things for virtually anybody who might be watching this video or sincerely trying to lean into this deeply challenging, predicament-laden future. So again, without center, if we're dysregulated, and that's what our society is prompting us to be, is constantly dysregulated and uncentered, then there is little hope of being able to be of service to those we love, to be able to be present. So you get the idea. I'm going to move us quickly into number 4. Number 4 is deepening of the practices. This is a place where if in 3 we were just getting the idea of what it is to sit in circle in kind of a drop-in style support group like we have here in Living Resilience called Safe Circle every Tuesday evening, Pacific time. And just about every one of the groups that I mentioned before, that's possibly folks are watching from those groups, they are also drop-in style support groups that are a safe place to be able to at least be at the first level of what is it to be in a supportive circle, a circle in which you will not be attacked or judged or ridiculed for having some point of view or having challenging feelings, that you will actually be supported to speak what's true for you and so on. And so we learn at the basic level of how to hold space for one another. Here we're going to the next level of holding space for one another, the next level of intentional crafted vulnerability that you can bring to the group consciously and ask for some assistance. Because this is where we start to look at some of the darker elements that are at play that are actually causing our world to be self-terminating. There is nothing more obvious than at the center of this is shadow, individual shadow, cultural shadow, global shadow. That is what's running this show. That is what's got pedal to the metal of our continued expansion of these existentially threatening behaviors and systems around the world. Shadow, at its most basic level, are aspects of ourselves, again, either individually or collectively, that we deny. If I'm in shadow, and all of us have shadow. It's just the way it is. We're saturated in it these days. So whatever aspects of myself I am not proud of, or I'm not wanting to admit to, or I'm not wanting anybody else to know about me, the more I shove them away and deny them, the more I'm going to actually be expressing those in an unconscious and usually extremely negative way, destructive way, harmful way. Doesn't always go like that, but that is extremely prevalent, especially at the collective level now. We are literally taking our entire global habitat down, God knows how many other species, including our own. We are self-terminating because of this kind of dynamic, plus a few others. So in this section 4 of the 6 sections of this introductory course, we get to see an exemplar, a person who is an extraordinary example of someone who has clarity and an embodied freedom from most, if not all, of her own shadow dynamics. I don't know anything about her personal process. I don't know what got her there. I don't know if she's done a lot of shadow work or if she was just born with this kind of blank slate in this arena. I doubt that she's shadow free in every dimension of her life. But what I'll just briefly introduce you to this person who's again in the core video at the center of this section 4. Her name is Dia Khan, and she's a woman of color. She's a filmmaker. And in this particular interview, she tells us about her films that she's at that point making. I want to say 7, 8 years ago was probably when she was making the films that she's talking about, all the way up till about 3 years ago, when I believe was the first time we used this interview in this video. the people that she interviews are people that are really committed to harming or killing people like her. These are white nationalists. These are extremely racist men exclusively in these particular groups that she interviewed. And it was really her desire to be able to tell the story of, to find some way of understanding something about how these groups operate and what makes them tick and so on. And all I can tell you is I've seen this video probably 20 times now. And it is a privilege to watch it again for me. I, I, I'm going to jump way ahead as if you all are a part of Living Resilience now. In fact, you've all been a few weeks into this introductory course. You're engaged. You're really working the journal and having conversations with other folks in the course. I challenge you all to find people who are engaged in some of the elements that I'm going to be describing, and the ones that matter to you as well that I won't bring up. It's very, very important that we find some way to allow in examples of people who have done substantial inner work. This is not the kind of work that just happens by chance and yeah, you got it or you don't. You don't really have to do much, and a couple of life hacks and you're off and running. This stuff takes work. This stuff takes a commitment to be present within our body, to get good at self-regulation, to get good at co-regulation, to get really good at holding space for other people in your family, loved ones, work environment, other groups, to be able to hold space in a spacious and larger scale is going to be one of the most profound skill sets needed within, well, now, and it will only increase. So what you'll see with Dia Khan is her gracious and very humble description of how she got invited into the spaces, including the compounds, the remote, far off the beaten track. There, she's alone with a couple of producers and film camera people, and they could easily have been killed, never heard of from again. And the punchline, which doesn't matter because you will be enchanted, I'm certain, is that she found a way to be in conversation and in some kind of growing relatedness during these interviews to the point where there was a substantial mutual respect. I can't say that these are now best friends in the world and they're going over to each other's houses for dinner and so on. It's not that way. But there is a depth of respect and open-heartedness and realness that is still in my eyes, after hearing this story recounted many, many times, it's still jaw-dropping. So that's section 4 about our relatedness. It's about really being willing to just name that there are some practices here that really could use some attention. Not everybody will choose the same menu items off the practices menu. It's going to matter what matters most to you. It's going to matter where you want to be headed in terms of the inner preparations and the outer preparations that you and your family might want to do as the stress level rises at every level. Let's go to section 5. That's the official course location for this week. And there are a couple of advanced practices that I'd really like to lean into here. This is officially in the course material right now. There's a small number of very well-known senior philosophers, psychologists, therapists. Yeah, they each offer a perspective on how can we find purpose? How can we find purpose? Because one thing that may not be, intuitive to just kind of get it is that if we are in the process of reclaiming our center in a number of ways, physically, emotionally, energetically, uh, if we are sincerely expanding our capacity to be present by reclaiming our centers in each of these different dimensions, what I've seen in my own life and my own practices and in many, many people that I've had the privilege of working with is that the reclaiming of that center in a number of different dimensions in our own bodies, in our own lives, gives us access to discovering what is our purpose, what is at our core, at this home, this center. This is the place that one would go to when asked what matters most to you. Remember that little segment of your journal that you're going to keep contributing to? This is a big contribution to that section of your journal this week and possibly for the rest of your life. There are a couple of other experts who I've had deep respect for, and in terms of one of them, long-standing mentoring and learning from relationship. And these two experts, I'm very pleased to say, um, have just recently met one another. And in fact, while they were meeting one another, they happened to do it on the podcast that's hosted by one of the men in this case. So I'm going to speak a little bit about these two men and their two areas of expertise and their focus, what they deploy their attention on, what they bring their presence to. And if I may be so bold, I would say that this is the area where each of these people do their soul work, something that I've been extremely fond of since our book club, which we have here in Living Resilience. Just a few months ago, we finished up with a book from poet Mark Nepo. And he is a poet of great soul. He's also a teacher. And I learned a tremendous amount through his poetry, through his reading of the audiobook that I happened to listen to in that book club session. And there is nothing quite as needed and possibly useful and possibly healing as doing soul work in these times. And in both of these men, you'll find an embodiment of some of the aspects of what I'm here calling soul work. One thing is that the soul is a part of us that is really about our purpose. It is the deep and dark and kind of loamy or muddy inner space that life can spring from. But it is dark, and it's all the goodness, and it's all the shadow, and it's all of it mixed together. And it is the place from which we are able to be deeply real. And if there's one thing that I would suggest from my own direct experience in this world is what we need now is direct contact of that level of soul, of that level of center, of that level of being able to have and be in direct, hands-on, smeared on us contact with all of the beauty and the gold and the incredible miracle that it is to be in these bodies and alive every day. And also mixed in with that is the shadow and all the elements that have led up to now, in which we find ourselves in a global self-terminating trajectory of this 8 billion people and God knows how many other species. How one can discern if you're in the vicinity of soul, things tend to slow down. Things tend to slow down, and we tend to be able to honor, deeply honor every one of our feelings, our core feelings. This isn't a place where we try to resist it or fix it or find the 12 life hacks for anger or for to be happy all the time. No, this is the area of slowing down to really feel and feel together. One of the cornerstones, one of the men that I'm talking about, his name is Francis Weller. He's a therapist and he calls himself a soul activist. And by the way, for those who are the students in this, the participants in this course, we are actually now shifting to number 6. So we'll be dancing back and forth between some of the topics of section 5 and section 6 of this Collateral Beauty course. So just dance. It's gonna be pretty fluid from here for the next few minutes until we're done. With Francis Weller's focus on soul work and grief, he, as a therapist, has been working with people with these particular areas of focus for decades. But it's in the last almost 2 decades that he's been leading workshops and doing group work for the group experience, for the community experience of grief. Can you imagine anything closer to the core of that dark and slow and deeply feeling zone of soul work than grief? That's what he figured as well. So you'll hear Francis Weller describe what got him into this and then what took him from an individual appreciation of and resonance with grief to one in which it's actually a group, a community experience. This in and of itself is profoundly important in these times where we're grief phobic and a death phobic and a failure phobic and a soul phobic culture. So each of these topics for the average person, it's like doesn't even show up on their screen. We're deeply disconnected from soul, from each other, from earth. We are deeply disconnected. This community lens and way of experiencing grief, it actually is ineffable for me. All I can give you is a few scattered words that will come close. And that is that there is such a beauty, a collateral beauty available when I allow myself to sit in circle and to dive deep with others into that pool of grief. And it may not be, it's not something to be performative or on demand. It might not be a strong upwelling of grief for me today in this circle. But what I can do is I can hold space for everyone in the circle. And I might find after being there in a while, something might resonate, something might be upwelling. But it is no less important to be there, to be uh, supporting and harmonizing and coherent, being coherent with this group of people, each of whom is ready to do this diving. So you'll hear him describe something about the grief rituals he runs and why that orientation. And please, I hope you'll take some good journal notes about his presence, his pacing of how he speaks. And you'll hear the other man, whose name is Thomas Hubel, speak about him in a second. Thomas Hubel mentions a number of times in this interview the literally the poetry with which Francis Weller tends to just extemporaneously just express. He's very much into poetry, so there's no question where he pulls on from his extensive experience with poetry, but he also is in that mythopoetic neighborhood that it was talking about with Michael Meade. So this whole exploration of the importance of grief as an advanced practice at really the higher end of what we're going to be talking about in this introductory course, I hope you can start to get a feeling. Perhaps you have an experience yourself of having come together with other people, or a unique and deep experience of grieving yourself. And I hope that has been a superlative experience for you, one in which you are able to open up to more aliveness, more depth. So there's that. The other person in that interview, who is again an exemplar of a much needed advanced practice at every scale, from the most intimate personal scale to family, to friends, to lovers, to communities, to every level. And that includes, as it was with grief, this area of focus with Thomas Hubel also goes back through generations. Both of these are just close to coupled with one another, this grief and trauma. The way that trauma lives in our experience, in our bodies, in our day-to-day experience, all the way back to when we were born, and all the way back through however many layers of ancestral trauma can be discovered in our systems. This has actually, up till just a few years ago, this was something that you could certainly experience in process work, with people getting in a circle and processing, or doing grief ritual and so on. But this hasn't been medically or scientifically backed until just recently. In these past few years, there's been a tremendous amount of learning and research and discovery about how literally this is something that is then encoded in our systems. It can be grief at a cultural or an individual level from generations back. It can be at the level of a one-on-one, very intimate experience. It can be cultural, national, and global. I think of one chapter amongst many in the history of the USA. We are a country that does not do grief well, and we are a country that does not do the processing or healing or the integration of trauma in a good way. So here are these two experts speaking about their own way of feeling into and presencing in these important, vitally important topics. And while they don't specifically bring up these issues in this interview, I hope it's obvious to you that they are both very, very familiar with the larger scale and ancestral um, issues of unmetabolized grief and unmetabolized, unhealed trauma. And so the ones I'm thinking of are the Slavery Foundation in the USA and the decimation of the indigenous populations in the USA. Just two of far too many deeply toxic elements that make up the toxic foundation for a self-terminating system. My own question, one that I ask quite often, is with that level, just those two, the two of many, so bear with me, I just bring up two. The slavery of the first few hundred years of this country, residual still to this day, and then the decimation of the indigenous cultures here. With those as foundations, found cornerstones to our way of life, what we call normal, our governments, our corporations, our communities, our laws, across the board. This is we're all saturated in the influence, the toxic influence of just those two elements amongst many, many more. What I believe that these two men are implying it with their bodies of work separately. And for those of us who are doing our own kind of combining of elements to create a body of work, like living resilience, like Collateral Beauty, we have some opportunity, and it will be different for every single person. Every single person will have a different capacity to be able to take on these shadow elements, these grief elements, these deep hatred and polarization elements, these how catastrophically separated we are from Earth and the beyond human populations around the world, how deeply disconnected we are from other people, from our own inner wisdom, our own deeper selves, from our own souls. But what I've seen is while every person will have a different capacity in their life to do this kind of exploration, possibly do some of this process work, possibly do a grief ritual, or be engaged in some personal expression or personal healing or personal inquiry into expansion of awareness, an expansion of wholeness, an expansion of interbeing and of compassion and of healing and so on. What I've seen is that, yes, there are those different levels of capacity for engaging deeply with the work, but it's remarkably common for people, even brand new to this conversation, long, way back at one problem level, just learning and beginning. I've rarely seen it that a person doesn't get, oh, this group can go deep. This person is asking for some assistance in space holding so that they can, they will ask the group to help them see where their shadow might be activated here in this relationship problem or whatever it is that they're wanting to bring, and ask the group to hold with them. This seems like another one of those wider embraces. Remember back at the beginning, I was describing that one energetic guided imagery situation in which people are just almost immediately seeing these advanced distinctions and occurrences energetically. This can happen also in advanced work, in space holding, in being sitting in a circle with people. So you might be in one of our more advanced experiential deep learning groups, one called the Community of Practice. You may want to put your toe in the water and find out, okay, what's it like? What do you guys do in this advanced group? And you may arrive on a day when someone asks for some space holding about a particularly tender item, or one in which they have some tears or some grief, or they might want to ask for some seeing with regard to shadow dynamics that are possibly in their personal relationship, and so on. These are just examples of amongst hundreds that what are possible in a circle like that. So I actually included in that little last section, I sort of implied that there are ways to stay connected. If you come into living resilience and perhaps show up at a few safe circle calls, and perhaps you're interested in learning about a contemplative or an activating practice. There are a number of different practice courses and special focus groups in which you can join in with kindred spirits here and have some camaraderie. I'm going to now loop it back to what I really started with back at the beginning of this particular video. I strongly, strongly suggest find your people. There's no longer a lot of time to take on this scale of practices. You can come to a drop-in level support group, Safe Circle or Collapse-Acceptance, and so many others. They'll be there, and they're great. And they're just a lovely opportunity to co-regulate with people, to support one another, and to have some amount of a direct experience of what it's like to have coherence, a space of coherence, rather than one of dysregulation and the polarization that can happen out in our world. But to get into some of these more rigorous but extraordinarily valuable practices, this takes work. And I know of no better way to kind of prepare yourself for that level of work than to find your people. Invite a really good friend, somebody who's already on this wavelength to some degree, and invite them to join you in the Collateral Beauty course. If you'd like something a little bit softer, a little bit easier gradient to start out, you could take our How to Live in Collapse course, which is really just a thin veneer over the lovely book by Terry LePage from the Deep Adaptation community. Her book from last year, The Eye of the Storm. And it was read and very generously contributed by Michael Dowd, one of the last projects he created before he died. It's an extraordinary and easier level, slower gradient. Take your time. Remember that slowing down is a good thing. So that you would find that just a couple of lines down from the Collateral Beauty course in the group, in the courses section or menu of that Living Resilience community space. If you have any questions about any of this, how to navigate around, how to get connected up, how to join, how to go to a safe circle call, a number of those links are down in the show notes for this video, as is my contact information. I'm available for, to the best of my ability, answering any questions that you have approaching this work. And you may still be in the Michael Dowd camp of, what is it you do? That's okay. You can come in with that question. I'm very familiar with it. And I guess what I'd like to do to finish up here is really just thank you all. No matter what has you here, kind enough to watch this kind of too long video. You may ring your bell and it may intrigue you and it may not. I just want to thank you for your willingness, your curiosity, your warm curiosity got you here. That is one of the core capacities of that we all need to have embodied in this time of collapse. And I thank you for taking this time. I hope it's been useful. I do hope you're intrigued. I hope you'll sign up and come join us in the last couple of sections of the live meetings of this course. And all of them will be recorded and they'll be available on demand anytime. And thank you for whatever other groups you're in, whatever other people you relate with, whatever you're doing to make life just a little bit better. I don't know that there's anything we can all really hope to do. We've all probably heard the kind of smack talk that people who want to use the word hope. Gee, I hope life turns out, or I hope things get better, or whatever. And in this community, this collapse-acceptant and collapse-aware community, it's rare for people to use that word. And the only way I would really be comfortable using it is to speak about my hope that we can find a way to continue to expand our capacity to be present at a truly unusual and non-ordinary way as this world increases and increases the level of ambient stressor. I hope that we can each find a way to be a bit more kind and a bit more connected with our own deeper skills, our own center, that inner home with each other, connected with each other, connected with Earth, which we have not only disconnected from, but created an extremely detrimental, corrosive, damaging impact on. And I really wish for us all to, and you use your words. You might not be comfortable with the word soul, but whatever matters most to you, if it's spirit, if it's soul, if it's spirituality, if it's religion, if it's community, if it's interbeing, I wish us all a wide open and connected path for us to reconnect with what matters most to us. So again, thank you for taking this time. Don't hesitate to give me a call if you have any questions about this work. And thank you again for all that you bring. Welcome to another recorded live event supporting our most recent Living Resilience introductory course, Collateral Beauty. This course, designed to challenge and resource both newcomers and the very experienced in the collapse-aware and collapse-acceptant communities. Each recording in this series is from either the Saturday or Tuesday online Zoom gatherings intended to deepen an embodied and shared experience of this inner work of collapse in the course called Collateral Beauty.